Well, hello there and welcome to the bathroom of the dollhouse, where all the big thinking gets done. That's right. And what are we thinking on today? Well, another reading from The Secret Language of Birthdays by Gary Goldschneider and Hugh Stelfers for March 19th, the day of dogged persistence. That's right. And here at the top of the page is a visual representational image of the day of dogged persistence. We have what appears to be a sea otter, looking after a fish there, or chomping down on it if you like. Very interesting is that the otter is more related to the wolverine than the dog, all right? So does that speak to the day of dogged persistence? Hey, it might just, considering he's on land, and they typically don't leave the water. That's the visual representational images side. Not altogether all too important. They typically are a little bit enigmatic, so it doesn't really matter if they land on it for sure. That said, what is important, like I said at the top, is it's March 19th. So if it's your birthday, what's important around these here parts? Wishing you a happy birthday. All right. That said, a lot of times folks randomly join us or they're interested in celebrating the March 19th birthday. So if that's why you're here, I just want to say hello, welcome, and I hope you enjoy yourself. Now, before I dive in with the redirect, something I like to do around these here parts, take a few moments to do, and that is roll some dice. That's right, this is the DykASSt birthday broadcast, so I like to live up to the namesake. But if you've been here before and you're not interested and just want to get into the redirect, we'll jump ahead in the chapters. That's what they're there for. That said, I'm going to be here rolling dice because I do so more importantly for synchronicity's sake. That's right. And it sounded like a drop, but it rolled, that's for sure. And what did I roll today? Boom, a 6 and a 2, a 4 and 8. I think that's the math there. That said, what is synchronicity? Well, my friends, as I hear it told, the universe or the higher powers that be will oftentimes put things in our path to help us realize our goals or manifest our aspirations. But a lot of times we're very narrow or singular of focus, or may even have the blinders on to what's going on around us. So maybe we're not picking up on the things the universe is putting in our path. This is a little bit of an exercise to help us take those blinders off and start identifying those things. Now, how do we do that? Well, we need some kind of sign that's agreed upon between us and the universe, one that we can't help but recognize. Hopefully, all right? That's right, your daily numbers. Now, you don't have to go with the numbers that I rolled for you. The intention is there, but it's probably advisable you take your own set of dice if this is something you want to try out. Once you get that all established, pick out a place maybe near and dear to your heart or some place that you haven't explored before and set out. But like I said, first things first, get those blinders off because you never know, the day might start to take on. There's a little bit of a theme if you like. Let's take the visual representational image, all right? You might start to see sea otters in places that you wouldn't otherwise see them. It doesn't have to be a real sea otter. It could be on a advertisement, say for the aquarium or, visiting the coast. Or maybe you see an animal eating a fish, or some place it wouldn't otherwise be. I know that sounds a little bit innocuous or a little bit arcane, but you never know. It might start to take on a little bit of a theme in that respect. That said, get after this first particular time value and directional value, and maybe you're not seeing much of anything. That's all right. Just take it in stride. And you know what? Take a step back, look around, see what you see. Maybe you just so happen to notice something small, all right? Like you're on 62nd Street or 8th Avenue. I don't know, your numbers might start popping up, all right, outside of the theme. So I would take that as a sign you're on the right path. So, you know what? Roll yourself the dice again, see what numbers pop up, and head on out. Maybe at the end of this particular time value, you know what? Hey, maybe you find yourself in front of an alleyway. You know what? You can use the dice for yes and no kinds of things, all right? Even, odd kind of stuff. Maybe, hey, do I go down this alleyway? Maybe the dice says no. All right, okay. You roll yourself another time value, directional value, and then maybe it tells you go across the street, all right? And for another 5-10 minutes there. Who's to say? But maybe at the end of that particular time value, you find yourself in front of a building with, the numbers in the address, the old 61 perhaps. Or what was it? It was 2. I think I moved the dice there. You get the idea, all right? So maybe go on into that particular building and see what you see. Hey, maybe it just so happens to be a travel agency, and you know what? They've got a special on aquariums, all right? Or a trip to the coast. So there that otter theme starts to pop up. But you know what? You're not in the market for that. I would say just tell them what you're doing when they ask you why you're there. Hey, I'm not in the market for anything. I'm just here trying to drum up some synchronicities, some coincidences, if you like. And they're apt to say, well, that's kind of crazy. And you're like, I know. Maybe you show them this video and they go, yeah, you know what? That's crazier. And you're like, well, why is it crazier than it was before? And they say, well, because it's my birthday too. And you're like, whoa. You know what? I often bring up that example just on account of, you know what? Sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. And you know what? Maybe nobody else is in the market to go on an adventure that they have to go plan with a travel advisor or whatever. So maybe they close up shop and join you. All right. And what's interesting about that, outside of the fact you might have just made a new friend, is the more people who are focused on the same results, same outcomes, these synchronicities, if you like, you're apt to beget greater results. All right. So get on out there. I think you get the idea. Try to stack up some coincidences, see the magic that the universe has in store for you. You know, you see, taste, touch, smell, hear, just intuit some of those things. I think you're apt to see why I bring it up. So hopefully it blows your hair back and makes for an interesting birthday. All right, you get the point. Let's get on with the birthday read. That's why you're here. Your month is March, your day the 19th. Your sign is 27 to 29 degrees Pisces of the Pisces Aries Cusp, the first day of it. And your quality and element is mutable water. All right, March 19th, the day of dogged persistence. Those born on March 19 have the dogged persistence needed to achieve their ends, and they know how to use their charm and allure to help them. These highly directed people are both dreamers and doers, and they are able to translate their imaginative ideas into reality. Though assertive, March 19th people may not be the most self-aware individuals, and indeed a strong reality factor may be at work here. And March 19 people are outwardly directed and intent on winning others over in their viewpoints. But what those born on this day may be attempting at times is to change external reality to conform to their inner picture of it. And this may sound like a dubious proposition, but through their tenacity, those born on March 19 are surprisingly successful. March 19 people possess very pure and childlike qualities. But though they are expansive types who sometimes give the impression that they are in another world, they are in fact forceful and businesslike. And thus they are a bit paradoxical in nature and can appear to others as being alternately dreamy as well as fiery. And some March 19 people are explorers who break new ground and go where no one else has dared to go before. But more often, they are pragmatic individuals who proceed methodically. And whether the nature of their undertakings, March 19th people usually move in a straight line fashion, convinced that their principles are just. And as a matter of fact, they may even see themselves as reformers, putting everything right after years of neglect by others. And due to this lack of objectivity, however, they can well be headed off track or in the wrong direction. It is indeed important that March 19th people chart their course with care, because once they are convinced they are on target, they will want to follow through to the end. They are also extremely diligent and capable of operating on a personal level with little need for fanfare, reward, or acclaim. And they will doggedly pursue their goals even though it may mean endless repetition of tasks. And they never seem to tire of their own activities, and perhaps at times even going at things too slowly. And this thoroughness is one of their most basic attributes and usually guarantees a successful outcome to their ventures. And as hard-nosed and as hard-working as March 19 people can be, they must learn to be more realistic about who they are. Acquiring self-knowledge and an awareness of limitations is extremely important. And part of their development will inevitably include learning not to overreach. And they must make an effort to keep their egotism and egotistical impulses under control. And by adopting a modest attitude, they may prove to be still more successful in their efforts. All right. Hey, this is a particularly fascinating birthday breakdown, I would say. Not necessarily altogether all too rounded out. I make mention of that because before Capricorn, most of the birthday breakdowns were very well rounded. They might talk about your relationships or how you act as a parent, what your life was like as a child more often than not. None of that was really here, but they really did drill down on the theme and then expand out from there. There may be a reason for that that we'll get to here shortly. That said, I'd like to provide a little bit of a commentary on things we read, maybe make connotations with days previous, the period at large, and just things I found interesting. So let's dive into it, shall we? March 19th, a day of dogged persistence. You're said to possess, again, a dogged persistence. You're highly directed both as dreamers as well as doers, and you may possess a charm and an allure that helps you as you effort in toward your different ideas and manifesting those things into reality. That said, the reading claims you may not be the most self-aware of individuals. Your dreams ostensibly being just that powerful. But you are outwardly directed and geared toward captivating others' instinct, even if your ends are to alter fixed propositions, like they said. But with enough dogged persistence, the reading claims you may be, in fact, successful in manifesting how you see it in your mind. Pretty interesting. In no small part, I'd argue this ability hinges on these purported pure and childlike qualities. That's what I think in my mind there, which probably lends to that charm that they said you have. Which by my mind makes you endearing also, even if you were fiery and forceful business types, like they said. Possessing that charge of excited innocence and curiosity with almost like a twinkle of knowing, I'm imagining, which would soften even the hardest of hearts, even if it doesn't necessarily win them over to your side. So that's kind of how I imagine it works for you. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. So maybe take it with a grain of salt there. What else there? Having said that, the reading claims that some folks born on this day are explorers who break new ground wherever they venture. Both figurative and literal aspects, I would venture to assume. But despite possessing a pragmatic, methodical approach with your undertakings, oxymoronically, that's kind of a lack of objectivity, they said, which may lead you off track from time to time. It's kind of the mind that objectivity and pragmatics were baked into the same particular bargain there. Doesn't seem that's quite the case. So I'm glad this came up and made me reassess that preconceived notion there. But I'd like to think it's this connection to your emotions that lends you your trademark charm in no small part. But from a pragmatic standpoint, plotting your course, I think that makes all the sense in the world. Especially if you're apt to drive on your target regardless of the ostensible obstacles that are in front of you there, or others' lack of faith too, to that extent. So you're going to want a firm and bulletproof plan in place, I would say, considering you may be apt to go off track, as they mentioned. Let's see here. It also said that you're known to follow that said faith to its end regardless. So yeah, putting a plan in place, I think that just makes a lot of sense for you, if all of it said in the breakdown remains true. That said, I appreciate this quality of being able to follow through your endeavors without any fanfare. A lot of people can't do that. They need that support at some point. And I feel as though I'm capable of the same, but I'm sure that it's not quite the same in your respect there. Fanfare always helps, right? So if it's for you, it doesn't matter. You know what? The hat I'm not wearing's off to you in that respect. The same goes for this endlessly repetitive task thing that they mentioned. And for me, you know what? I feel the same way there. You got to get after this endless task. Never seems to be any end to it. For you, they said, doesn't necessarily matter. It might be right in your pocket. So again, the hat I'm not wearing is off to you in that respect. But I emphasize in that respect about being realistic about one's efforts in those regards. All right. Synchronistically speaking, I came across this just when I needed it. Reading this particular birthday entry, the dogged persistence. Sometimes you get a little burned out. And so I read this and I was like, man, this is just when I needed it. So a little bit of synchronicity there on my end, interestingly. So hopefully this finds you when you need it. Maybe when the faith there is a little bit lacking, just to say. That said, mind that you don't overreach and maintain that modest approach, I would say, okay? Huge part of ensuring that your charm persists. And you don't want to get rid of that allure, all right? That's what captivates others, I would say. So, any event, that's what I'd say about your breakdown. Let's move on to your numbers and your planets. That's right, getting a little bit of astrology and numerology and start explaining why I said this day was so hyper-focused in the bargain, all right? So, those born on the 19th of the month are ruled by the number 1, as 1 plus 9 equals 10 and 1 plus 0 equals 1, and by the sun. Neptune and Mars, the rulers of Pisces and Aries, respectively, combine their influence with those of the Sun to reinforce the dreamy yet forceful March 19 nature described in the breakdown. And those ruled by the number 1 like to be first. And they bridle at restraints, and they don't like being subordinate to authority. And this characteristic is even more pronounced for March 19 people, since in addition to being ruled by the number 1, they are also born on the first day of the Pisces-Aries cusp. And no other number has greater meaning to March 19th people than the number 1. And this business about being first can amount to a mania with them. Very interesting. It's too bad we didn't roll us a 1 at some point, though I think I moved it to a 1 on accident there. So that said, what did I have to say about your numbers and planets? You know, they personalize this one for you quite a bit. They don't often do that, or at least they don't do it all the time in that respect. So, you know what, you take that and feel like they did you a little bit of a favor there. That said, let's get into the notes here. The number 1 in the sun, a tremendous creative force said to represent the outward drive toward unique individual expression. It was kind of mentioned elsewhere in the book to that end. And it seems that it's the most apt description in your case. Yet another little synchronistic happening, as it's the first time that I've gone to the back of the book for a sun-ruled day. It typically puts in the same characteristics to say the typical traits that weren't conveyed here outside of liking to be first. That's always kind of come up. But it's said to keep your energy flowing steadily rather than allowing it to flare out of control. And so since that wasn't here, I decided to go to the back of the book and see what the Sunday had to say. And there you go. We got this synchronistic thing that happened for you, I would say. It lines up perfect. And I would say it doesn't necessarily seem to line up with a lot of the other sun-ruled days that I recall. Now, here's that thing I was saying about why this particular day was so hyper-focused. Sun-ruled days tend to be hyper-focused and on the theme of the day. And here I would say that's no exception. They really drill down on that idea of dogged persistence and expand it out from there. Cusp-wise, Neptune is the planet of dreams and visions, and it lends to concerns for higher concepts and ideals. And they also bake in a little bit of romanticism there. So those folks are said to kind of have their head up in the clouds on ethereal matters. If you, I'm sorry here, ethereal matters if you like, okay? And Mars is a more earthy, kind of aggressive, god of war kind of planet with the energy where people are just, they're itching for a fight almost. You know, not literally, but hey, maybe literally. So they're just aggressive individuals in a lot of terms. So two contrasting powers, I would say. And it might explain your charm and your childlike curiosity. Also your drive, okay? But also a tendency to maybe get you lost on the way, perhaps. The sun and then just further bolsters those particular powers. And so I'd say it's interesting. Just go on back to yesterday, March 18th, to see what happens from a Mars-Neptune dynamic by itself without the sun. And you kind of see some of the dynamics that come up from there and how the sun kind of changes them. So, you know, if that's of interest to you, so you can kind of see what dynamics are at play without the sun. So you get the idea there. That said, you know what? There was everything was Aquarius when Uranus came in with Neptune, and it made all these folks very childlike. And so, like, all the Mars power completely abolished ostensibly. And so I was under the impression that happened in Pisces. I kind of forgot that element there. So, because this childlike wonder kind of came up, this nature for it being alluring and charming. I was like, oh, that must be that childlike aspect there. Well, it might just be Mars and Neptune kind of acting together, and that added power from the sun kind of pushing it through to the finish line there. So again, don't give up on the charm or the allure. What was the other thing? Neptune tends to have a magnetic influence on folks, where you're apt to break down barriers of absolute and rigid natures. So that might be a little bit of it in there too. And with Mars coming in with its little bit of aggressiveness, just making it take a whole new form. Who's to say? I'm not an astrologer, just kind of going by what's in the book here, but I found it pretty interesting, as personalized as this was. So it might just be for you alone. Who's to say? That said, that's your numbers and your planets. Let's move on to your tarot. That's right, one of the more eclectic of the New Age metaphysical ideologies, but we don't have to take it home with us to start dealing out the cards to, predict our future, however they're used. But a lot of times we can actually make connotations with the breakdown, and it's just further food for thought in those respects. Today is kind of a sparse card, so we'll have to see if we can make the puzzle piece fit into the larger picture. But let's dive into it here. The 19th card of the major arcana is the Sun. It can be considered the most favorable of all the major arcana cards, and it symbolizes knowledge, vitality, as well as good fortune. And due to both their number and tarot card, March 19th people are granted strong sun influences. It must be noted, however, that misusing such power can bring disastrous results. So, all right. Like I said, a rather sparse tarot card entry. And a lot of times it's a once a month card that pops up just for you. There's no other 19s that come into the bargain there. That said, too, it's said to give you great fortune. The most favorable card rather in the deck. So it's kind of interesting. It doesn't say a whole lot. That said, I tried to expand on as much as I could. Let's see what I had to say here for you. The sun for some ostensible sun dynamics. Kind of interesting how that lines up there. Once a month happening where precious little seems to be imparted. But symbolization of knowledge and vitality, as well as good fortune, all of which I would argue is kind of naturally baked in with your approach to life if the breakdown applies. The good fortune aspect coming to you if you maintain your drive and your modest, charming nature, I would argue. But generally speaking, I'd say disastrous effects are apt to be realized for just about anyone who misuses their power, at least in one way or another. So it's rather generic in those terms. But considering not much is said, it's kind of hard to try and make this card better apply. So, sometimes this happens even on the days where they say a lot about the card. Sometimes that puzzle piece doesn't really seem to fit. That said, maybe just take it as a little feather in your cap that you've got the most fortuitous card, or maybe there's some other resource that really expands out on it. I don't have that here with me. Like I said, I'm not a tarot card reader or an astrologist, so the new agey stuff, not in my library. But in any event, hopefully you found it interesting. And knowledge and vitality, you know what, maybe that's baked in there for you. So in any event, that's been your tarot. Let's move on to your health. All right, here we go. March 19 people are success-oriented and therefore must constantly guard against headaches as well as other effects of psychic stress, including insomnia. Very interesting. I think it was said earlier, I don't want to kind of burn things down, but I don't think I mentioned this, that Neptune and Mars have psychic energies that kind of arise from the coupling of those planets. I don't know who's to say, but that might be why they brought up the psychic stress. But getting back to the read, soothing teas and massages, particularly of the feet, toes, and the neck, may be helpful in dissolving tension. March 19 people are generally adventurous in the kitchen and often disregarding recipes and freely improvising. And this may not, however, lead to the healthiest of combinations, and therefore they should rein in some of this enthusiasm and focus a bit more on a nutritional balance in their diet. It is also important for March 19 people to exercise vigorously during the day. Interesting. They will sleep better when physically spent. All right. Hey, you know what? Highly personalized health entry for you today. They mentioned some things and then they kind of did so in a way they haven't done before. All right. Again, probably burning down everything I have to say. Let's get into it. It says you're success oriented. You must guard against psychic stress-related issues. Very rare, okay? Don't think it's ever come up before. But foot massage, that's also an interesting first mention, all right? But it's also interesting because the Pisces body areas are the feet, the toes, and the lymphatic system. The Aries body areas are more the brain, the spine, the cerebellum and such, the head and face. So I don't quite know what to say about that body area, how to kind of protect that, but they didn't bring much up about it. But this past Pisces area, one thing that they tell people to do is avoid dairy, because your lymphatic system doesn't do well with built-up mucus. So maybe make sure you keep that out of your diet, or don't use as much of it as you necessarily need while you improvise in the kitchen there, all right? What else do I have to say here? Kind of common that cooking comes up. It's kind of started in Capricorn and is carried through past Aquarius and on into Pisces. My reckoning for why they bring that up, because typically they mention specific foods that you should drill down on, and they haven't been doing that as much. But cooking keeps coming up, and I think that's just because you incorporate fresh and healthy ingredients with as much. And there was only one day where they mentioned that was the aim. So I don't know why they left that out, but there you go. So, but yes, I think this is the first time they've mentioned that you might be a little loosey-goosey with the more rich and fattening and maybe otherwise unhealthy ingredients. So mind you, don't get out of control in that respect. Again, pretty novel that this is the first time it's come up. So like I said, no food recommendations for you specifically, but for Neptune, commonly those are grounding foods like grains, vegetables, no real meat or sugar. But with Mars in there, I would say you can probably throw those into the mix too. So just, maintain a sense of modesty with it. Don't go too crazy. Also, they said you got to have vigorous exercise, every day. Very interesting. So that you spend all that energy. I would say that's because of Mars and the Sun. Vigorous exercise doesn't tend to come up unless it's a Mars day because of that aggressive god of war energy. Sometimes it'll pop up here and there if Uranus is in the mix, shaking things up, because that's the planet that electrifies and shakes up dynamics. But more often than not, it's just for Mars. And if the Sun's coming in there and bolstering Mars's power, that's probably why it comes up. But again, I don't think I've seen it phrased this way before. So again, you get something that's just for you. In the event, that's what I'd say about your health. Hopefully you took something of value from that. Before we move on to your advice. All right, I'm getting mumble-mouthed with the copy. Let's see if I can rein it in there like you're supposed to be doing. All right, get to know yourself better, all right, and examine your motives. Beware of having undue influence on the lives of others and maintain respect for them. Don't push too hard, cultivate modesty, and keep your egotism under control, or egoism rather, although I thought there was supposed to be a T in there. All right, so what I'd say about your advice. Bear with me, I had to put it in the book here because I ran out of space on the page and my writing's tiny. Here we go. They said get to know yourself better. All right, self-awareness is a huge through-line theme in the book itself. All right, not knowing your limits is a rarity, and it makes sense in those regards, I would say. Just get to know yourself as well as you can, and then, when you start seeing problems arise or things you can't necessarily do very well, then you know when to pull it back, etc. What else do we have here? Also, understanding why you're chasing what you're chasing after on a fundamental level may prevent you from wasting your time on losing prospects. All right. It says beware your influence on others and respect them. I would say your charm may just be that powerful. People are going to bend over backwards to help you realize your goals and endeavors. But with loved ones specifically, I think this came up quite a bit with Capricorn. They may be sacrificing their dreams for you. All right. And that kind of sucks, I would say. Which it's a kind of a somber thought too. Like this, it's nice that they're bending over backwards for you, but hey, what are their dreams? What are they sacrificing for that? And what value could they provide the world if they weren't focused just on you? So, you know what? Maybe turn the spotlight on them for a little bit. Find out what they want to do. Help them realize their ends too, all right? Especially if they're a loved one, all right, or a friend. So what else I have to say here? They said don't push too hard, cultivate modesty, and keep your ego in check. I didn't get the idea that you necessarily went against this particular grain of thought here, if you like, but healthy reminder, I would say, for such an important facet. It's good to be mindful of at all times. The ego, that's right. You don't want it to get out of control. Sometimes good fortune can also shift our perspective, I would say, if that's something you find. You start getting that good fortune, you think you can do whatever you want. So things are always going to land the right way up for you, all right? You're always going to be flipping whatever coin toss that you're always calling the right one. You know what? It could change in an instant. And like I said, cultivating that humility, even if it does always land your way, just kind of take it in stride. You don't browbeat people with that reality, all right? Because then you might rouse some antagonists, all right? And it doesn't matter how much charm and allure you have, you might get some enemies in the bargain, all right? So that's what I'd say about your advice. Let's move on to your meditation. That's right, it's your birthday. You get something to think about. All right, here we go. It's very concise. You ready? All life is sacred. Okay, don't quite know what to make about that one for you, but once again, all life is sacred. All right. Your birthday, your meditation, I'm not going to try to throw my spin or interpretation on it. I have an idea, but again, wouldn't do you any good. It's just for you on your birthday. So that said, your meditation in the can, all life is sacred. Let's move on to your strengths and your weaknesses. That's right. Let's hold up that objective mirror. The objectivity being something that you can improve, they said, who's to say. But let's look at where you maybe got the girth and where otherwise a little more atrophy. Let's cultivate some of that self-awareness we brought up. That's right. Your strengths, you're persuasive, you're tireless, and you're thorough. Interesting. I saw it. But your weaknesses. Oh, let's hold that objective mirror back up and flip it to the side that blows up your face. That's right. Maybe shows up the things you otherwise a little more superficially insecure about within the metaphor. That's right. Your weaknesses. It says you're unaware, you're stubborn, and you're closed. Very interesting. Very interesting. Oftentimes I like to make a case that our strengths are going to help us overcome our weaknesses. If our weaknesses are something that even need improved upon, you got to have that self-awareness to figure that out, I would say. But I also like to make a case that our weaknesses can also be strengths in their own regard. It just depends on the situation, also the individual who has them at the hand, all right? There was one day a couple months back, impulsive popped up as a strength, and the very next day, it was a weakness. So I was wondering what the disconnect was, and that's kind of where I landed. It must just depend on the situation and the individual. So let me try to make a case for these things. How can we improve upon our weaknesses with our strengths? You're persuasive. I would say you take that charm and your allure, and you can convince others to help you figure out how to improve upon your weaknesses. Or maybe you know how to do it, and you just need their help, all right? It said you're tireless. You're gonna just keep getting after it until it's done. It sounds like you might lose some sleep too. You might in the bargain there. You might also put no uncertain amount of psychic stress on yourself until it gets done. All right, and then you get a foot massage. You charm someone into a foot massage, and you keep going. All right. That also says you're thorough. Hey, you know what? You're gonna make sure that everything's improved upon. All right, writ large, as I like to say. But what's the case to be made for your weaknesses? This one I get into a little bit of trouble with myself here because I don't always make the best cases, but let's see what I can pull out of my tool bag and do for you here. It says you're unaware. Okay, how can that be a strength? I would say it allows you to focus on what matters, okay? At least to you, okay? If you don't know what's going on outside the purview, then you don't have that influence in you. What else did I write down here? You're ignorant to what's going on around you, okay? Same kind of thing. Also ignorant to toxicity. A lot of people can be influenced by the comments of other people, and I would say probably all of us in no small part, to varying degrees, if you like. But if you're unaware, you're ignorant of it, hey, that doesn't influence you. So that's a strength. I can see how it's a weakness. Sometimes you need to be aware of what's going on, all right, in order to better understand the situation. But again, it's kind of a fence riding thing. You got to figure out the pros and cons and what works for you. So you're stubborn. How can that be a strength? Let's see. Well, it provides you a certain amount of determination, all right? And you might also cultivate more of a following and respect because you're so dedicated to the task. I would say all of those are the strengths they mentioned, all right? Persuasive, tireless, and thorough. I would say those could be considered stubbornness in a certain line of thinking. You're also closed. I would say you're protected from bad advice, all right? That said, on the other flip of the coin now, you might be protected from good advice too, because you're not open to it. What else do we have here? He also allows you to stay away from making hasty decisions, all right? Some folks who are open to everything, hey, I'm going to land on this one. Oh, that sounds good. I'll land on that one. But if you're closed, hey, you're staying in the pocket, all right? Might not be the best pocket because you closed everything. So you know what? You just got to salt to taste, all right? Figure some things out on your own when you got the time, maybe. What else is the other thing? Seeking advice versus receiving it, all right? You're going to decide when you need to go after some advice, all right? And I would say that's the most proactive way of doing it. You start receiving it, you're probably going to be closed to it, because it's kind of a passive-aggressive kind of feel to it. People giving you what you should do. Hey, you know what? I wasn't asking you, all right? When I'm asking you, I find it interesting when you ask people for advice, they don't tend to give it, but they're apt to giving it when you don't want it. So interesting dynamic there. So how do you get around that? I don't know, but maybe just have the feelers out to ask for advice from those you know who don't get out of pocket with it. That said, I think you get the idea. I don't know how good my little experiment was there, my practice, but hopefully you took some value from it regardless. Gave you something to think about. That said, those have been your strengths and your weaknesses. Let's move on to those born on this day. And when we get into those born on this day, something I like to do is look at it from the perspective of figuring out our passions. Use it to drum up some inspiration. A lot of times I get out in the world and meet folks, ask them what they do, more importantly if they like it, and they don't. And I think the simple reason for that is maybe they got right out of school, immediately into a job to make ends meet. And the fatal flaw of that job was it had nothing to do with anything they liked or, maybe if they even knew what they liked. But you know what? You start getting into a rut, climbing that corporate ladder, you start to get a little comfortable with all the money you're making. Maybe it's not as hard as it once was because you got people underneath you kind of doing the job for you, or you know what I mean. But that said, the very root of it, like I said, nothing to do with anything that you're passionate for. Again, if you even know what your passions are. So again, this is something that I think is provides the perfect opportunity for us to start thinking about it. Because I think it takes time, effort, and energy to figure those things out if we don't have them in our back pocket. But if you do have your passions figured out, well, then again, the hat I'm not wearing is off to you. So for those of you who don't, hey, let's drum up some inspiration. Or kindle the fires to start focusing on as much. Because if there's anything I can wish for you on your birthday, it's that you're chasing after a purpose or a passion, all right? So let's see if we can do as much. Let's get into it here. Those born on this day. We start off with David Livingstone, a Scottish explorer and the first non-African to view Victoria Falls, and found in the jungle by Sir Henry Morton Stanley. So it sounds like he was an explorer, going through, blazing a trail, discovering things other people hadn't done, being places other people hadn't been, but he got lost, all right? So, careful there. All right, what else do we have? Wyatt Earp, or who else do we have, rather? Wyatt Earp, the U.S. Marshal, brought law and order to the western towns, all right, including Tombstone, Arizona. And if you haven't been, I highly recommend going. Pretty interesting place. Also responsible for the gunfight at OK Corral. We also have Sir Richard Burton, a British Orientalist, it says, and also an adventurer. We have William Jennings Bryan, a U.S. statesman, congressman, and a Democratic Party leader, and a presidential candidate for which he tried 3 times. Dogged persistence right there, even if he didn't necessarily get elected, all right? Also says here, prosecuting attorney in the Scopes trial, or a Scopes trial, rather. There's only, all right, any event, only one O in there. We have Earl Warren, the U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice, Glenn Close, the film actress, Albert Pinkham Ryder, a late romantic landscape painter and a visionary. He had his Neptune powers about him, it sounds like. Bruce Willis, the TV and film actor, Sergei Diaghilev, Russian ballet producer, and it says Ballet Russi founder and premiered Stravinsky's Rite of the Spring. We also have Moms Mabley, a comedian and a singer. We also have John Sirica, or Sirica perhaps, a Watergate judge. We also have Philip Roth, the novelist, responsible for Portnoy's Complaint, as well as others. We have Irving Wallace, the novelist of The Chapman Report. And we also have Lenny Tristano, jazz post-bop pianist. And it says Blinded in Childhood. All right. We also have Courtney Pine, a British jazz saxophonist. Patrick Magoon, a film and TV actor of The Prisoner fame. We also have Ursula Andress, a film actress. Baroness Maria Wetzera, a lover of Archduke Rudolph of Austria. And it says a double suicide by Mayerling. Not quite sure what that means, but you know what? Sometimes they mix in some of the somber events as well as some of the other people that you don't necessarily want to be associated with. So the bad with the good sometimes. And we also have, and here we go, proving my point, Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi official and mass murderer. So sometimes they shoehorn those in there too. So just be aware things can go off the deep end. All right, we also have, here we go again, Albert Speer, a Nazi architect. So in any event, we ended on kind of a sour note, but you know, like I said, you can't necessarily always have the day without the good and the bad. So in any event, that said, let's pick it back up here. I'll get a little bit jovial if you like. That essentially rounds out your birthday reading. I know I butchered a ton of names in there. It was a more difficult day in that respect. So let's make up for it on my side of things. Not done in malice. It's just hooked on phonics. Isn't the best tool for Russian, French, all sorts of different names there, or words in general for me too, as it would turn out. That said, I know it's a big ask, tall order to try and take inspiration from other people's accomplishments, but hey, hopefully I can just put the bug in your ear to start figuring out your passions. Then my work here is done, all right? Because that's what I can wish for you on your birthday, is that you're jumping out of bed doing backflips in order to get on with your day and just do something fulfilling, all right? I think it makes all the difference in the world. That said, like I mentioned earlier, that essentially rounds out your birthday reading. Except to say your season is winter, your sign once again is Pisces, of the Pisces Aries Cusp. Like, once again, the first day of it, and your quality and element is mutable water. And this has been March 19th, the day of dogged persistence, from The Secret Language of Birthdays by Gary Goldschneider and Hugh Stelfers. I have an affiliate link for this book down in the description if you're interested in picking up a copy, getting it through it quicker than I could do for you without all the commentary and such, but hopefully provide a little bit of value for you there regardless. That said, put it down there below, right above a personal message I like to put together for the birthday boys and girls, ladies and gents, so if you're interested, check that out too. But this thing makes an excellent coffee table book if you're ever in the market for something to help break the ice during a party or having company over. It's going to do the lion's share of the lifting in that respect if you're not one of those folks who necessarily likes to get the party started, all right? Or maybe you do, but someday you just need a little bit of time off from as much. Hey, it's going to get it done for you. That said, book, not altogether all too important. What is important, like I said at the top, that's right, wishing you a happy birthday. So once again, happy birthday, all right? And for everybody else who joined us randomly or is here more ideally to celebrate the March 19th birthday, I just want to say thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I also hope to see you for your birthday reading. Now, lest I forget before I take us out, that's right, your daily numbers. Get out there, even if it's not your birthday, and let the universe show you it's with you on your path. See, taste, touch, smell, intuit just a little bit of the magic. Hopefully get your hair blown back, and you'll understand why I brought it up, all right? So once again, or no, not once again, finally, I'd just like to say thank you for the pleasure of your time. It was a privilege to share your birthday with your birthday boys and girls, but for everybody else, hey, I'm just glad you stuck through to the end. I hope you took some value from everything. So for the birthday boys and girls, hey, once again, happy birthday. All right, take care of your feet, alleviate all your psychic energy, and you know what? Stay charming, alluring, stay modest. All right, and don't be running roughshod over those people. All right, though it's nice to be unbrindled to some extent. I would say that's part of your allure. All right, so once again, happy birthday. Take care of yourselves.